The night was doing that thing where the cold crawls under your jacket no matter how tight you zip it, like it's personal, like it's got beef with you. And the bus stop on 9th looked exactly how bad decisions feel at the end of a long day, flickering light, cracked bench, silence broken only by engines sighing past without slowing down. Daniel Harper stood a few feet away, one hand wrapped around his phone, the other gripping his briefcase like it might float off if he let go, suit sharp, but eyes tired in a way no tailor can fix, while his 6-year-old daughter Ellie sat swinging her legs, humming to herself, completely unbothered by the cold because kids still believe the world is mostly safe. That's when she slid off the bench and walked straight up to the woman curled near the shelter wall, the one everyone else had walked past all evening, the one with a coat too thin for winter and hands shaking like they'd forgotten what warmth feels like. Ellie didn't hesitate, didn't ask permission, just tilted her head and said, clear as day, "You need a home, and I need a mommy." The words landed heavy, like somebody dropped a truth bomb right onto the concrete. The woman looked up slow, eyes glassy but sharp, like she'd learned the hard way not to trust anything that sounded kind. And Daniel's heart jumped into his throat as he rushed forward, already apologizing, already pulling Ellie back. Because boundaries, because strangers, because that's how the world works. But the woman didn't reach out, didn't beg, didn't even flinch. She just smiled, small and broken, and whispered, "That's a powerful thing to say. Kid." Daniel noticed then how pale she was, how her lips were cracked, how she was trying real hard to pretend she was fine when her body was clearly calling it quits. He told Ellie they had to go, that the bus was coming, that this wasn't their problem. But before he could turn away, the woman tried to stand and the world tilted on her, knees buckling, shoulder slamming into the metal pole before she slid down hard, breath knocked clean out of her. Ellie screamed, "Daddy!" And Daniel was already there, hand on the woman's wrist, pulse weak but there, skin burning and freezing at the same time. And in that moment, every rule he lived, by every line he'd drawn between his life and everyone else's, started to blur. He carried her without thinking, because thinking would have meant stopping, and stopping would have meant leaving her there. And something about the way Ellie clung to his coat and whispered, "She's gonna be okay, right?" made that impossible. The walk home felt longer than it was, snow crunching under his shoes, the woman light in his arms like life had been peeling pieces off her for years. And when he kicked the door open and the heat rushed out to meet them, it felt like crossing some invisible line he wouldn't be able to uncross later. He laid her on the couch, wrapped her in blankets, poured water she barely sipped, while Ellie hovered close, drawing pictures on scrap paper like she was already planning a future that hadn't been agreed to. When the woman finally opened her eyes, she scanned the room like she was counting exits, then looked at Daniel with a mix of gratitude and fear that hit him harder than anger ever could. "I won't stay long," she said quietly, voice rough, "just until morning." Daniel nodded, told her that was fine, told himself this was temporary, told himself a lot of things that didn't quite stick. Ellie climbed onto the couch anyway, tucked the blanket tighter around the woman's shoulders, and whispered, "See? You're home now." The woman swallowed, turned her face away so no one would see her cry, and Daniel stood there realizing this wasn't just about shelter anymore, because whatever had followed this woman to that bus stop didn't look like it, was done with her yet, and he had a feeling. He'd seen her before, somewhere official, somewhere with files and names and consequences, even if he couldn't place it just yet. Morning came in sideways, gray light slipping through the blinds like it wasn't sure it was welcome. And Daniel woke up on the couch with his neck wrecked and his brain already running laps, the kind of tired where coffee feels like a suggestion instead of a solution. The woman was still there, curled up tight under the blankets like she was afraid the house might spit her back out if she stretched too much, and Ellie was on the floor beside her, coloring with serious focus, tongue poked out, drawing stick figures with a house that had a crooked roof and way too many hearts floating around it. Daniel watched from the doorway longer than he meant to, something warm and dangerous stirring in his chest. Because this was how attachments start, quiet and sneaky, pretending to be harmless. The woman woke slow, blinking like she didn't trust the ceiling, then pushed herself upright, immediately apologizing, saying she should go, saying she didn't mean to cause trouble, saying all the things people say when life has trained them to take up as little space as possible. Daniel handed her a mug of coffee and told her to relax, that she looked like hell, and he didn't mean that rude, just honest, and she almost laughed before catching herself. Ellie beamed and announced, "Daddy's a lawyer, so he fixes problems." Like that explained everything, and the woman's smile faltered for just a second. So fast, Daniel almost missed it, but not quite. He clocked it, filed it away, because that's what he did for a living. Noticed the thing nobody wanted noticed. She introduced herself as Mara, last name clipped short like she was cutting off loose ends. And when Daniel said his, something shifted again. A flicker of recognition she tried and failed to bury. Breakfast was awkward but real. Toast burned, eggs half runny, Ellie talking non-stop to fill every gap, and Daniel catching himself enjoying the sound of another adult in the house. Even if she spoke softly, like the walls were listening. But the whole time, there was this tension humming under the table, like a wire pulled too tight. And when Daniel mentioned he had court later that day, Mara's hand froze around her cup, knuckles whitening, breath hitching just enough to tell him this wasn't coincidence. He left for work with his head buzzing, the image of Mara standing in his kitchen refusing his offer, of a ride burned into his mind. And the second he sat down in his office, muscle memory kicked in, fingers pulling files, eyes scanning today's docket, until one name stopped him cold. He stared at the screen like it might blink first, like it might apologize for being there, because the name matched the face too perfectly. The same sharp eyes, the same tired strength, only here it came with words like custody, neglect, and failure to appear, stacked together like a verdict waiting to happen. His stomach dropped. The homeless woman on his couch wasn't just down on her luck. She was tangled in a case that could end with her losing everything she had left, and the judge on it was not known for mercy. Daniel leaned back, rubbed his face, and felt the ground shift under him. Because this wasn't some abstract problem anymore. This was personal, and personal was dangerous. All day, he argued motions on autopilot, nodded at colleagues, smiled when expected, but his mind kept snapping back to Ellie's voice saying she needed a mommy, to Mara's flinch when she heard the word lawyer, to the way life sometimes lines things up so clean it feels like a setup. When he got home, the apartment smelled like soup. Real soup, the kind that takes time. And Ellie ran to him waving a drawing that showed 3 people holding hands under a big block letter word. Home. Mara stood behind her, hands twisted together, eyes searching his face like she was bracing for impact. And Daniel realized this was the moment before everything cracked open, because he now knew exactly who she was. And by the look on her face, she knew he knew, too. The truth finally landed between them like a glass dropped on tile. Not shattered yet, but one wrong move from exploding everywhere. And Daniel didn't bring it up right away because he needed to hear it from her mouth, not from a court database that didn't know how. She held a spoon like she was afraid to spill gratitude. Dinner was quiet in that heavy way where nobody's hungry. But everybody's pretending, Ellie chattering until she noticed the adults weren't laughing, then going silent and hugging her stuffed rabbit like it could. Translate the tension. After bedtime, Daniel stood by the sink staring at soap bubbles that refused to pop. Then said her name like it weighed a ton. Asked her straight if she'd ever been in family court. Mara didn't flinch this time. She exhaled slow, sat down, and nodded once like she'd been waiting for this question since the bus stop. She told him about the missed hearings. The job that vanished when the shelter ran out of beds. The paperwork that kept multiplying while she kept shrinking. The ex who disappeared and left her holding a mess labeled as failure. She said the word unfit, like it had been carved into her skin. Said the system didn't see people, it saw deadlines. And when you're broke and tired, deadlines eat you alive. Daniel listened, jaw tight. Anger not at her, but at the way the machine chews people up and calls it order. And when she finished, she whispered that she understood if he wanted her gone, that she wouldn't drag his kid into her mess. That's when Ellie padded out in socks, hair a mess, eyes shiny with sleep, and announced she couldn't rest because grown-up sadness is loud, then climbed into Mara's lap without asking like that. Was the most natural place in the world. Mara froze, hands hovering, until Ellie grabbed them and tucked them around herself, And Daniel felt something inside him snap because whatever the file said, this right here was real. He said he'd help, not because he was her lawyer, he couldn't be, but because he was a human who refused to let a kid lose, someone she'd already chosen. And Mara cried the kind of cry that's silent and violent, like a dam breaking inward. Court day came fast and ugly, fluorescent lights buzzing like they were rooting against her. And Daniel sat behind the bar with Ellie, who wore a dress. She'd picked herself for bravery, swinging her feet and whispering questions about judges and gavels. Mara stood alone at the table, shoulders back, eyes forward, looking like someone who'd already lost but decided to show up anyway. And when her name was called, the room shifted, papers rustled, the judge's face unreadable. The case unfolded in that cold, clipped language that forgets there's blood under the words. And when it came time to speak, Mara's voice shook once then steadied, and she talked about trying, about failing loudly, about loving a kid even when the world says love isn't enough. The judge leaned back, fingers steepled, and asked if there was anyone willing to provide stability. And before Daniel's brain could argue with his heart, Ellie stood up on the bench, pointed at Mara and said clear as day, "She already does, you just didn't see it yet." And the room went dead silent like even the air was listening. Daniel apologized fast, tried to pull her down. But the judge raised a hand, eyes softening in a way Daniel had never seen, and asked Ellie who she was. "I'm the reason," Ellie said, simple and fierce. The judge sighed, glanced at the file again, then at Mara, then back at the kid who refused to sit down, and said the words nobody expected. Continuance granted. Emergency placement approved. Supervised, temporary, but enough. Mara collapsed into the chair, breath leaving her in a rush. Daniel's knees went weak, and Ellie grinned like she'd just solved a puzzle nobody else could. Outside, the sun hit them hard and bright, and Mara dropped to her knees, hugged Ellie, and whispered thank you like a prayer. While Daniel realized some cases don't get won by arguments, they get won by showing up with your whole damn heart. And this one wasn't over yet. Not even close, but for the first time, it felt like they were walking in the same direction. The weeks after, court didn't slow down. They got louder in that sneaky way where life pretends. It's calm while testing every week. Joint in the frame. And Daniel learned fast that helping someone rebuild wasn't a movie montage. It was rides to appointments before sunrise, reheated coffee going cold again, and paperwork that fought back like it had teeth. Mara moved into the guest room officially. Supervised visits stamped and timed. A social worker popping by with a clipboard smile that never quite reached her eyes. And Ellie treating the whole thing like it was already settled. Introducing Mara at school pickup as my bonus mom and daring anyone to argue. Nights were the hardest, though. When the house finally shut up and the doubts got loud, Mara staring at the ceiling like it might cave in if she blinked. Daniel sitting at the table pretending to read while listening for the sound of someone breaking apart quietly. One night, after Ellie fell asleep mid-sentence with marker ink on her fingers, Mara confessed she was scared the judge would change their mind. Scared the past would come back swinging. Scared she'd get used to this warmth and lose it all over again. Daniel didn't say the easy stuff. He didn't promise guarantees. He said they'd fight the right way. Show receipts, show growth. Show the truth without dressing it up. Because pretending never saved anyone. The final hearing came on a rainy Thursday. The kind of rain that makes everything honest. And this time, Mara walked in steadier, backed by letters, proof. A job offer from a diner owner who liked her grit, and a social worker who'd finally noticed the way Ellie's grades jumped and her nightmares dipped. The judge read, listened, paused, then asked Ellie if she wanted to say anything. And she did, standing tall, voice calm, saying, "I already have a home. I just want to keep it." And when the gavel came down with a clean sound, not dramatic, just done. The room exhaled together because it was over. Temporary turned permanent. Names stitched together on paper like they'd always belonged. They celebrated small because that's how you respect miracles. Pancakes for dinner, cheap candles, Ellie insisting on a speech where she thanked the judge, the bus stop, and being brave even when your knees are scared. And Mara laughed so hard she cried again, this time without fear riding shotgun. Months passed, the house filled with routines that felt earned, Mara hanging her art on the walls like a quiet flag claiming territory. Daniel learning how to ask for help without feeling like he was failing at. Manhood, Ellie growing fast the way kids do when they feel safe. Taller, louder, softer where it counted. On the anniversary of the bus stop night, they waited there together not because they had to, but because they wanted to remember the moment everything cracked open, and Ellie read a note she'd written in bubble letters. Homes can start anywhere. People walked by, buses came and went. Nobody noticed them standing there holding hands. But that was fine because some victories don't need witnesses. As they headed back, Mara squeezed Daniel's hand and said she never thought a courtroom could give her a family. And he said families don't come from rooms. They come from choices you keep making even when it's hard. Ellie skipped ahead, turned around, and yelled, "Hurry up! My mom's and dad." And Daniel didn't correct her because the word fit now, clean and true. If you're listening and you think the past has your name locked in a file somewhere, hear this. Papers can lie, people can change, and sometimes the smallest voice is the one that calls you home. So don't miss it when it speaks, because it might be the beginning of everything.